Everybody, hope you're doing well on this Tuesday. Hope you all had a great weekend, even though we're on to Tuesday now, but happy to be back here on the podcast. Got a new microphone. Excited for that. So lots happening, lots to discuss. Today in the program, we're going to discuss Brian Harman winning the British Open, or some people call it the Open Championship at Royal Liverpool. The uneventful weekend at Royal Liverpool, but we will talk about it. Also going to get into some NHL news and notes, had some signings, had some different things happen over the weekend. UFC London, some takeaways, a call out from Tom Aspinall that I didn't think went all that well. There's a new owner in the NFL for the Washington Commanders. So we're going to talk about that today and why everybody should be excited and what that team should do. And we're a week away from the MLB trade deadline. A week today, August 1st, is the trade deadline. What's going to happen? Very few moves so far. The Blue Jays acquired Genesis Cabrera from the St. Louis Cardinals, and he actually pitched for them last night in their extra innings win over the Los Angeles Dodgers at Chavez Ravine. But will they do more? What are other teams going to do? Who are sellers? We still have a lot to determine over the next little bit. And honestly, looking at baseball right now, where are we when it comes to the trade? I've talked about some of the players that could be traded, but I don't think we're going to see that much happen. The Chicago Cubs are currently 5 games out of the final wildcard spot in the National League. But I don't think they're out of it. And I don't think they think they're out of it. Because that wild card, you have San Francisco, you have the Marlins, who haven't won since the All-Star break. You have San Francisco, who have lost 6 in a row. It's a struggle for a lot of these teams. The Diamondbacks lost to the Cardinals last night. So nobody in that race is playing great baseball. The Phillies have had a couple tough series that didn't go their way. They lost in a nail-biter last night to the red-hot Baltimore Orioles. The Dirty Birds continue to win. So who is going to sell? Kansas City had Aroldis Chapman. He's already a Texas Ranger. So that isn't happening. And they don't really have that many assets to sell. The Detroit Tigers are not trading Miguel Cabrera, and nobody wants Miguel Cabrera. Do they have starting pitching that they'd be willing to part with? The Chicago White Sox, would they trade a Tim Anderson? Get that salary off the books and a depreciating asset? There's that possibility. But it's a difficult move, and I think if you're a team acquiring Tim Anderson, it's a bit of a risk because you don't know what you're going to get. He's a good player, but you're still like, what's he going to bring to our team day in, day out? Lance Lynn, a pitcher that's got a no trade, another player that doesn't deserve a no trade. He's got close to a 6 ERA, and I saw last night the Blue Jays aren't on his no trade. He's going to block a trade to the Blue Jays. So that's not happening. So he gets to control his destiny. What are the Cardinals going to do? They traded Genesis Cabrera, but since they said we're going to sell, since the All-Star break, the Cardinals are one of the hottest teams in baseball. Nolan Arenado is playing fantastic. But yet they're 11 games out of first in their division. They're not going to make it. And they are 9 back in the wild card race. They're not going anywhere there. But if you're trading Jordan Hicks, would you trade Miles Michaelis? Does Adam Wainwright want to finish his career as a Cardinal? Likely. But even then, I go through these teams. Teams have to make up their mind. We're a week away. San Diego, 6 games out. The Mets, 7 games out. after their disappointing series against the Red Sox this weekend. Where do they go from here? And a lot of these teams, if they're going to be sellers, you need to sell stuff that people want. You need to sell a Scherzer. You need to sell a Verlander. For the Mets, David Robertson, closer, really good bullpen arm. He would be intriguing. He's pitched in a lot of high-profile games. But do the Mets, even though Steve Cohen said, we will sell if we're in that position, will they? Will the baseball people want to sell and admit failure? Because it could be their ass. Steve Cohen owns the team. He's not firing himself. Buck Showalter hasn't been fired yet. Would have been easy to have a sacrificial lamb in late July, fire Buck Showalter. You move on with your life. There hasn't been a manager fired in baseball this year. Buck Showalter remains. Marmol remains in St. Louis. Chicago White Sox first-year manager after Tony La Russa retired. He's still employed. So no changes there. Nobody's saying, oh, the manager, it's your fault. They're not pulling a Blue Jays from last year. So are baseball people, presidents, GMs, do they want to admit failure? Because then it could be their ass. It's not the manager if you sell off the pieces because the manager didn't sign those players. You did. You brought in the players that aren't working. You brought in the players that aren't producing. We've seen hitting coaches brought in. The Yankees did that and things of that nature. And now, since I talked about the Yankees, they've won 3 in a row. But then again, they're beating the Kansas City Royals. So is that really beating anybody? They're pathetic. But through all of these teams, Marcus Stroman makes sense to go to a team, and I think the asking price will only be going up with Marcus Stroman because teams need starting pitching. Staying in Canada, the Blue Jays, you could argue, are going to have a 6-man rotation when Hyun-Jin Ryu returns, whenever that might be. But how many of those arms do you trust? You trust Kevin Gausman, obviously. Even though he didn't have his greatest start over the weekend, he's been their ace. He's been one of the best pitchers in baseball this season. So you trust him. After that, do you trust Chris Bassett? I hear all the time, Chris Bassett's been so good. I think he's been okay. Don't get me wrong. People say I have high standards. People that love me tell me that. Of sports teams, of just things in general. I don't know. I could argue Yusei Kikuchi's been as good or better than Bassett. Sure, Bassett's gone a few. I like earned run average. It's old school, but it works. It's effective. Chris Bassett and Yusei Kikuchi, fun fact, have the same earned run average, 3.92. You wouldn't have thought that. They do. So is their production the same when you go on the mound? Are you expecting similar results? So let's say if you're the Blue Jays, it's confidence level. Kevin Gausman, obviously one. If you want to go Chris Bassett, 2, okay. Jose Barrios. Do you have full confidence in him? Pitched 5 innings last night. That's Kikuchi territory. That's 5 innings. 5 innings, 5 hits. Okay, you only give up 2 earned. That's good, but 4 walks. 3.40 ERA. He's got a better ERA than the rest of them. But do you have full confidence in him? They didn't have confidence to give him the ball over Ross Stripling last year in the playoffs. So is he number 3 in your confidence pool? Or is it Kikuchi? Alek Manoah, forget about it. Alek Manoah is not fixed. Alek Manoah is not ready. Anybody that's making that argument, you're listening to any other show, turn it off because they're selling you a bill of goods. They're selling you a fugazi. They're selling you lies. You have a starting pitcher that every time he goes on the mound, he gives up 4 walks. He is not a good starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. Period. End of story. That, and talking about that stat equaling what I just told you, that's not like a Stephen King book where it's 600 pages and you need to flip through to figure it out. This is a kid's book. This is Robert Munch. You open up the page, okay, it's over, you move on. Over. That's the book. Four walks per start. No confidence. You're not ready. You can't hit a fucking strike zone to save your life. He pitched on Sunday again. I didn't watch that much of the start, but I saw what happened. All I need to see is how many times you walked people, period. How many walks are you giving up per start? And if it's 3 to 4 every time you hit the mound, you are not reliable. You're not accountable, and you cannot be relied upon. He has time to work this out, and that will be the pitch, that will be the song and dance that is given to Blue Jays Nation. But from what I've seen so far, from him coming back to playing the Tigers, who might as well be a fucking AAA baseball team because they stink, and his 2 starts against actual teams that can play baseball, he has been below mediocre. And it's all, I get it. But to me, you can be a person that is optimistic in life and a person that can be pessimistic. And I appreciate optimism because I am the complete opposite. I am pessimistic about everything. I'm pessimistic about sports. I'm pessimistic about myself. I'm pessimistic about, anything that I look at. I come in with a mindset of negativity, which is not good. I admit that. It's one of my biggest flaws. It hurts me every day of my life. But that is me to my core, working on it. Shout out therapy. But when I look at a situation and the results are telling me I shouldn't be optimistic here, why should I be? That's just stupidity to me. That's not being smart. That's not angling. It's just, okay, I'm going to be optimistic here because sometimes you got to face the music and just admit that it's not working. And to me, that's what's happening with Alek Manoah, is he was allowing so many walks before he went to the complex. Came back from the complex, he's still walking everybody. So what does that tell you? The problems are still there. Because you can go down to the complex and pitch to 15-year-olds and pitch to prospects. But when you come back up to the big leagues, guess what? The pitch clock is still there. That isn't changing. The level of batters you are facing is the same. He looks exactly the same. So his physique, his workout regimen doesn't look to have changed much. It was just a month away from Toronto in the summertime. That's the only time you want to be in Toronto is the summertime. It's like anywhere here in Canada other than Vancouver. You don't want to be in Canada. From November to March, being in Canada is like being in Siberia or being in Salt Lake, which I put down all the time. It's dark, it's cold, and what else do you got? So you're away from the place you kind of want to be in, the months that you could actually be there. What good is that? It's craziness. It's craziness. But this week, we will see things happen, hopefully. Baseball needs it. I think baseball's had a good year. I think baseball's improved their product. But trade deadlines, free agent time boosts sports interest. Just does. The NFL free agent period, the NFL draft is in and of itself a day. The NFL owns a day. It's called Sunday. That's what it owns it because nobody else. What are you doing on Sunday from September to February? You're watching football. At least I am anyway. You should too. If you're not, they own that. They have a free agent day. They have a draft day. They own it. They occupy that space. If any other sport wants to try to do it, shun, you're out. Teams are trying to catch up. You need to own that space. The MLB draft has been a joke for 20 years. It wasn't televised until 2 years ago. This year it was on a Sunday night. It's a couple weeks ago when nobody knew it was on. Nobody knew it was on. But that's what it would be. I don't think this is going to happen. I think it would be the best thing for Major League Baseball if the Angels traded Shohei Ohtani. The Angels are on a roll. Shohei Ohtani leads baseball in home runs. He's got 36 home runs, 4 more than Matt Olson. Playing great. He's got some swagger right now. And they're winning games, but they've been playing bad teams. But let's look at this week. This week, the Angels are in Detroit starting tonight for 3 games. Then they go to Toronto on Friday. The Angels sweep the Tigers, which is no guarantee because they're the Angels. And let's just say the Blue Jays sweep the Dodgers. They already got 1. So hypothetically, if they both sweep, the Blue Jays would enter that series with a 4-game lead for the final wild card spot in the American League. Meaning, that's make or break time. The Blue Jays sweep that series, you're 7 back, and it's going to be August in a day. You're fucked. You're done. Pack it in. So the Angels will know where they are and where they sit. And to just sit there and allow a player to walk at the end of the season, potentially, does not make sense to me. Ohtani is first in Major League Baseball in triples. He's first in home runs. He's tied for third with Arenado in RBIs. He's first in slugging percentage. He's first in OPS. And he's third in WAR, wins above replacement. That's what he's doing this year. Oh, and he's 7th in hits. There's that. He's also doing that. I mean, Jesus. The dude's superhuman. So the Angels will know, but I was watching Pardon the Interruption last night, and they said that the Angels should be looking to add. I think it's too early. If you are 7 back August 1st, you are not making the playoffs. Yes, it's 2 months. I get that. They're not a good enough team. Mike Trout might not play until September. Anthony Rendon, it wouldn't surprise me if he never plays a baseball game again. He gets injured more than ever. He's the ultimate decision maker because he never plays. He just, okay, I'm not playing. Got another injury, something happened. Won a World Series since then. Check, please. Give me the check. Oh, well, not, check, yes. Check, please, on the season. But yes, also check, please, on cash him. Pay me big money to not be here. But, I mean, to think that the Angels could pass the Astros or pass the Blue Jays in the American League wildcard, potentially the Rays, who are on a downward spiral, I find it hard to believe. But I hope we do see activity. Because, yes, you can appreciate, the Baltimore Orioles have 62 wins. 2 years ago, they had 52 wins the entire year. 52 a couple years ago. They have a young team. that's really talented. They have one of the best closers in baseball, and Felix Bautista. They're 5th in runs per game. They're 7th in homers. They're 7th in average. They're 8th in ERA in all of baseball. And I do think they need help to win a World Series. But the thing with baseball, it's not like other sports where you need to learn how to lose first. Not really. Basketball, hockey, even football. You kind of need to go through that war and lose. I always talk about the Oilers with Messier and Gretzky. They needed to lose to the Islanders before they beat them. In basketball, Michael Jordan, he never lost in the finals because he was Michael Jordan, but he lost to Larry Bird and he lost to the Pistons. Eventually, he beat them. He overcame them after being out earlier in the postseason. Looking at the Chiefs, they lost to the Patriots in the AFC Championship game before they ultimately won a Super Bowl. I look at baseball, the Houston Astros are in the midst of a pseudo-dynasty right now. They never lost. They were a 100-loss team, and they got to the postseason and they won. They didn't have to go through a battle where they, year after year of losing and eventually broke through. The first time they made the playoffs after tanking, they won. They won that World Series. The Chicago Cubs, 2016, magical run. They just won the World Series. To me, baseball, it just happens. It's more random. The Atlanta Braves weren't a contender, then all of a sudden they were. They won a World Series quickly. The Boston Red Sox, every year, they'd make the playoffs, win a World Series, miss. 2018, they missed in 2019. Sometimes you just get in and you win. You don't need to learn that stuff. So, like in particular this year, you had Florida and Vegas. Vegas was in a conference final. The nucleus of that team, they went through battles. They eventually won. They had to learn how to win. Baseball, different. If a really good team got their hands on Shohei Ohtani, could they win a World Series this year? Absolutely. Houston and Texas, who are battling for top spot in the American League West, Houston walking them off last night. Would they both love that player? Yeah. Because they both know that they can win. They both know they have teams that can get there and win again. Now, would the Angels make that trade in division? Unlikely, in my opinion, but you never know. If you had the best package. Like, I get Artie Moreno saying, the owner of the Angels, that he wouldn't trade Ohtani to the Dodgers. I get it, but I also don't, because if I get the best package, that's where I'm trading the player. Like, don't make baseball the NBA. Don't make it the Damian Lillard situation. I will not trade him to Miami. Because it's okay. Well, if you're saying you wouldn't trade the player there because they're in your state, if they're giving you the best package, which is going to help the long term of your franchise, I don't give a shit where he goes. Fans might be upset that Ohtani goes to the Dodgers, but they'll be happy if you get great pieces in return and you eventually win. Fans are fickle, but they come back if you win. And most fans will complain, will say this isn't going to work. Why'd we do this? I'm not watching this team anymore. The oldest trick in the book. And then when that team starts winning or the next season starts, they're at the ballpark or they're in the arena or they're at the stadium because that's just who they're a fan of the team. It's instant reaction and they don't like what happened. But they have no say in it. They're along for the ride. So they'll bitch and complain until something else pops up in their life, and they'll thank God sports is back. But this year, I don't know. It's a weird baseball season because I look at Atlanta and I think they're the best team. But they had a little cold snap there, and I believe it would really help if they got some better starting pitching. If they can find that over the next week, they should be the prohibitive favorite. In the American League, I really like Houston. Houston's second in their own division right now. I get it. But Houston still has that nucleus. They've been there, done that. Dusty Baker as their manager, Kyle Tucker, Jordan Alvarez, Framber Valdez, Ryan Presley. All these guys have been in the postseason, won games. Adding guys like Mauricio Doban, finding Diaz, the catcher, adding Jose Abreu. The Orioles have the best record in the American League right now. I get that. But to me, it still goes through Houston. And on paper, are Houston better than Baltimore? Maybe not. Maybe not, but I look at Houston, and until I see a roster that would really scare me, I put nobody above them, including Toronto. Because I don't trust them either. As we talked about off the top with their starting pitching. Well, we're a week out. For teams, start calling. Make the deal. Help your team now. Don't wait until August 1st, the last day. If there's a deal to be made, make it. We'll track this all week. I think teams like Baltimore, small payroll, the Marlins, small payroll, the Rays, small payroll. How aggressive are they going to be? Will they add, knowing that they have a chance, but they don't want to spend more money because they're good enough to get to this point, not spending big money? There is logic to that. But you got to this point, you kind of want to win one of these. The Rays have been in the playoffs a ton, but they've been to a World Series, but they didn't win it in the bubble against the Dodgers. And then obviously they went deep when David Price was there almost a decade ago now, or over a decade now, but they didn't win there either. So you need to cap it off. Even if you're a small market team, can you find a way to do it? We'll talk baseball week. Good weekend for Teoscar Hernandez. Back-to-back walk-off hits against his old team. He's a rumored piece that could be on the move. He's got a good bat. He's never been a great fielder, but if you can, I've said this forever, if he could be your everyday DH, it'd be hard to get better than him. I like his bat. I think he's confident at the plate. I don't love him in left field or right field, quite frankly, but if you could DH for you more often than he's playing a position, you're doing well. And if he comes in and say you're a DH and you're going to play, well, that's just what it is. So we'll see. We'll talk about the Open Championship here in a minute. Let's pivot to UFC. UFC London was this weekend at the O2. And it was a fun card. It wasn't highlighted by massive names. You didn't have Leon Edwards, who's big. Paddy Pimblett is still recovering from ankle surgery. So you missed out on some of the biggest London names. But the weekend was about the return of Tom Aspinall, who some are calling the most talented heavyweight prospect in UFC history. A man who moves around at 250 plus pounds, like a guy that is a light heavyweight or even smaller. He can beat you on the ground. He can beat you with his striking. And he's so interesting. We had not seen him in the octagon for over a year after he tore his ACL in a fight against Curtis Blades last March. So I knew he was going to win the fight. He was fighting Marcin Tybura, who's number 10 in the rankings, who looked great physically, by the way. Had lost weight, looked to be in better shape. But Tom Aspinall's Tom Aspinall. Perfect opponent to come back against. And he did his thing. He beat him in a minute and 15 seconds. Knocked him out, gets the stoppage. All is great. He looks impressive. And he gets on the mic. Here's where it went wrong. Performance is great. London's so happy. He gets on the mic and says in September he's flying to France to watch Cyril Gane fight Sergey Spivak, which is the heavyweight main event the first weekend of September. He's going to go watch that fight. He's going to be in the arena, and he wants the winner of that fight. Okay. Cyril Gane's fought for the heavyweight title twice and lost both times, and both performances have been pretty awful. He was up 2-0 against Francis Ngannou with a torn ACL, and he lost the fight. He lost in the first round, didn't show up against John Jones, 0-2. Cyril Gane is in the back of the line. He needs to do a lot, in my opinion, to even be considered again for a title opportunity because he's been so awful in those spots. He is not close to being number one contender. He is not the name to beat. The guy in the heavyweight division that is occupying the most space outside of the champion being John Jones is Sergey Pavlovich. The man has won 5 fights in a row, all in the first round, all via knockout, and he is just completely going through people. His most latest win was against Curtis Blades, who is another really talented guy who technically beat Tom Aspinall. So Sergey Pavlovich is sitting on his spot. He wants to be the next guy to fight for the heavyweight title, but John Jones is going to be fighting Stipe Miocic in November at the Mecca, so he's sitting there. This is what Tom Aspinall should have done. He should have challenged Sergey Pavlovich to a fight later this year. Put it at the Mecca or put it at T-Mobile Arena in December. What we've heard is that win or lose, Stipe Miocic will retire after the fight in November. Go walk out as champion, or you lose and you leave the organization. John Jones has said he wants to finish his career in New York. He's a New York native. He fights in Madison Square Garden, the most famous arena in the world. And after that fight, he leaves. Okay, so both of these guys, win or lose, are leaving the UFC after their next fight. That would mean the heavyweight title will be vacant. So with that knowledge, Tom Aspinall, Pavlovich could be for a title in December, a month after these two fight. If John Jones is not going to retire, and the UFC has his word on that, you book Aspinall and Pavlovich on the same card. You put them on the MSG card. They're the third fight on. Pavlovich, Aspinall, 3 rounds, November. You'll have Colby Covington, Leon Edwards, then you'll have the other heavyweight title fight. So it's either clear that one of these two is the next number one contender for the belt, the two best guys in the heavyweight division, or if the UFC doesn't get that clarification, you have a title fight later in the year. Waiting for Aspinall saying, I'm going to that fight and I'm waiting. Well, if he sits there, they won't fight again, either of those guys, until February, March of next year. Maybe. Heavyweights like to take a break, like to sit on their spot a while. Cyril Gane doesn't like to come back really quick after fights. So I just don't think I just think it was a stupid call, and there was an easier name sitting there for you. And Jon Jones has started tweeting about Tom Aspinall. Maybe that fight excites him. Maybe he would stick around to fight him. Maybe he wouldn't. But he's getting on his nerves because he's mentioning him in posts. He's talking about him. And he's even said, this is his quote lately, everyone's the next big thing until I beat them. Well, that would be Tom Aspinall, because he said he wants Jon Jones to stick around so he can beat him. John's right. He's beaten everybody he's been in the ring with. Cyril Gane responded saying, great performance, Tom. Careful what you wish for. See you in Paris. And Jon Jones has basically said, you think you're good? I'm going to beat you. And Jon Jones said, sounds good. LOL. Said he wants to fight Jon Jones. But then he also says, everyone's the next big thing until I beat them. So Jon Jones is an enigma. You never know what he's going to do. He's a really hard guy to book, so Stipe. This is why this fight's taken so long to come together. Jon Jones has done everything in the business. He might not want to fight Tom Aspinall because he's just done. Came back, is the greatest light heavyweight champion of all time. Beat Cyril Gane. Then he'll go beat Stipe, and the best heavyweight of all time currently, and retire. He's 36 years old. Just turned 36 a few days ago. From Rochester, he gets to fight in New York, and he walks out in his home state. Nothing wrong with that career. The steroids and everything, obviously that puts a cloud over him. But he's still Jon Jones. And we know how talented he is. But for Tom Aspinall, Jon Jones is the champion right now, so you do have to focus on him. But to me, what I'd be focused on more than that is telling the UFC, book an interim title fight. Or if these two are retiring, it's me and Pavlovich. It's not Cyril Gane. Let him beat Spivak. Let him beat somebody to prove that he can hang in this division. Tom Aspinall has the hype right now. He's liked around the world. Pavlovich is this Russian that is a massive puncher. He's got some of the most dangerous hands in UFC history. That fight will do huge things. That heavyweight title fight will sell. Because both guys have proven that they can hang with anybody in the division. Pavlovich has beaten Tai Tuivasa. He's beaten Curtis Blades now. He's gone through everybody. Aspinall hasn't beaten. He didn't beat Curtis Blades because he blew out his ACL, but he's beaten Volkov, who's been in the heavyweight division for a long time. He's done everything you need to do to be in the title picture. I just disagreed with his approach. The UFC has two things. You need to be really good, obviously, because it's your sport. You need to dominate in the cage and get the wins and be impressive. But half the battle is going on the mic after, if you're given the opportunity, or going on social media and being interesting and demanding the right things. Juliana Pena is not liked. I get that, but she's fantastic at drudging up interest in her. I don't mind her at all. I find her interesting. She has done more for the women in the UFC than any woman has ever. Than Ronda Rousey, than Holly Holm, than Amanda Nunes. Because none of these women had any personality. None of them were able to sell a fight. Ronda had this allure about her, and you didn't like her because she had no personality, but she was a killer. And then when she lost, that was it. The 135-pound division has been stale for a long time. Juliana is trying to make it interesting again. For Tom Aspinall, he needs to look at the situation and know what he's talking about before the fight. When I win here, what do I discuss? What are my objectives? Who am I calling out? Who should I be? That's on his team, and that's on him. Common sense, knowing what he's doing. You want to go down the well of beating Cyril Gane? You don't have to go down that well. Because he's had 2 title fights and lost them both. Okay, you're going to go beat a guy that's lost 2 champions twice? What's that doing for you? People leapfrog people in the rankings all the time, and sometimes it's just about opportunities. Robert Whittaker wasn't getting a title fight against Israel Adesanya every time. He'd be number 1 in the rankings since he lost the belt. But you're not rebooking that fight every time. Izzy fought Marvin Vettori. He fought Jared Cannonier. He fought Alex Pereira. Because those guys had never fought Izzy. Sometimes it's just about interest. Cyril Gane has fought John Jones. We've done that fight. The UFC is never booking that fight again. He lost to Francis Ngannou. Can he get another title opportunity in his career? Sure, but I think it's multiple performances. He's fighting Spivak in September. He's got to get some wins. He needs to be impressive. That's just the way of the sport. He's number 2 in the rankings currently. He's fighting number 8 in the rankings. If he wins that fight, who does he get? I don't know. He's never fought Volkov. If Volkov beats Tai Tuivasa, maybe that's the next fight for him. Jayton Almeida is fighting Curtis Blades in November. If Jayton wins that fight, Cyril Gane and Almeida, that could be another fight. If you get by that crafty bastard with his grappling at that size, okay. You got my attention. Maybe you deserve another opportunity because you have proven that you can handle some really talented guys. But he's fighting Spivak in September. Spivak is known as being the polar bear. because he's a huge man, but he will wrestle with you on the ground, and he's incredibly tricky to deal with. I don't know if he beats him. Quite frankly, he struggled with Francis, and Francis is not a wrestler. Francis is a striker. Francis is going into a boxing match in October. He's not going into the grappling competition with George St. Pierre on UFC fucking Fight Pass. So, but I want to see Aspinall fight Pavlovich. I think that's the UFC knows that's the fight to make too. Just Aspinall wasn't smart enough to realize that. Mistake on his part. Misfire. I don't think it'll affect him because I think the UFC is going to book the right fight, but it makes him look stupid. I have to point it out. The co-main event, there were a lot better fights than the co-main event, but in the co-main event, you put Meatball Molly McCann, who's coming off a devastating loss to Aaron Blanchfield in November. And this fight did not go much better. Molly McCann lost to Stolarenko, who was 2-8 in her last 10 fights. Lost in the first round under 3 minutes. And it dropped her a minute 45. Locked into an arm lock. She tapped out. Drops her record to 6-5 in the UFC. And I honestly, after the fight, after watching her get destroyed by Blanchfield, my thought was, is her time up in UFC? Is she done with this promotion? I don't think so, after thinking about it, because they need these London fighters. They need people to put in London. It's one of their biggest markets. And she's a massive draw there. But she's struggling. She's not even competitive in these wars. And she announced yesterday that she'll be dropping down a weight. She'll be going to straw weight because she doesn't want to be with the bigger girls. She'll drop a weight class. So probably a good move on her behalf. But it was a poor performance. I didn't expect that for the fight to be over that quickly. So we'll see if she can rebound, but that was a tough performance from her. But overall, I thought the card was fun. Started off with a bang. Started off with a great finish by Javel Filio with a submission. Shauna Bannon, an Irish fighter with Conor McGregor ties, lost her UFC debut. Yanel Ashmouz, fun fighter, lost to Chris Duncan, Chris Duncan is really good. Really good. They call him the problem. He is a problem. He's 11-1 now in his pro career. He's fighting at lightweight, 155 pounds. He's a massive lightweight. He's won his last 4 fights, beat Jonathan Carlos. Then he was on the Contender Series, and he's 2-0 in the UFC, beating Omar Morales, and now beating Yanel Ashmouz. And then Yanel Ashmouz announced after the fight, broken wrist. I knew that in the first round. He started grabbing it. That wasn't good. But Chris Duncan is a threat there. Caitlin Vieira won a bantamweight. She's a top 5 bantamweight. Big win for her, dominating fashion. Let's see. Good story from London. Mick Parkin, local guy for UFC debut, still undefeated as a pro. He's 7-0. Let's see. Main card. Daniel Marcos remains undefeated, UFC debut. He fought Davey Grant. I thought Davey Grant won that fight. But Leron Murphy from England beat Joshua Kulabau. Another fun fight. Featherweight bout. And he gets a win. Fares Zion beat Jay Herbert. Paul Craig moved up to middleweight, former 205-pounder. He beat Andre Muniz in the second round. He's got options. I'm going to check that. I'm assuming he's going to be ranked as a middleweight and as a lightweight. So now he's number 14th in the middleweight division. And light heavyweight, they moved him off. So he's currently not a light heavyweight. He's in the middleweight rankings at number 14, taking Andre Muniz's number. But either way, you have some fun fights for him. He talked about fighting Bo Nickel, which I don't think the UFC is going to do that fight yet, but that would be fun. You got a lot of these guys are booked for this year at middleweight. He said he wants to fight again this year, so that move might be go back to light heavyweight, where there'd be more opportunities. Dominic Reyes has not fought in a long time. That'd be a good fight for him to get back to 205 pounds. Alonzo Menafield just won a couple weeks ago, International Fight Week. Their schedules could line up. I doubt Johnny Walker wants to fight him because Johnny Walker's looking to move up in the rankings, but Johnny Walker will be active soon. We haven't seen Rakic fight in a very long time. So Paul Craig has options. Good to see him get back in the win column. Then you had, to me, the fight of the night. Nathaniel Wood beat Andre Fili. Close fight at featherweight. And this was a war. Both guys at times I thought were going to finish the fight, but Nathaniel Wood edged it out. And now you have two guys from the London area who don't really like each other. In Leron Murphy, who's undefeated, and Nathaniel Wood. Nathaniel's 29. Leron Murphy is 32. I'd love to see them fight because they both have fun styles. They both like to get into wars. And featherweights, it's good to see these guys kind of emerge in the featherweight division. Got a little stale at Volkanovski. So I like to see that. But it was a fun card, and we gear up for UFC 291 this coming weekend in my favorite city in the world, Salt Lake City. Shout out to all the Mormons and the darkness and the jazz music. We'll talk about it more during the later this week, but you got Michael Chiesa making his return. He's fighting Kevin Holland, Tony Ferguson, El Kakui, and Bobby Green, two absolute veterans of the game. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Michel Pereira. This fight finally gets done. Jan Blachowicz, Alex Pereira at 205 pounds. And the main event for the BMF title, Dustin the Diamond Poirier against Justin the Highlight Gaethje. You also got Derek Lewis on the card, Roman Kopylov, a middleweight surging contender, Gabriel Bonfim, good little fighter. Fun card in Salt Lake. I'm happy for the people of Salt Lake that they get something positive in their life because it's it hasn't been much. Before we move up, MMA also yesterday booked for UFC 295 at the Mecca in New York. Derek Brunson back in the cage. He will be fighting Roman Dualise. Both men are coming off a loss. Derek Brunson lost to Dricus du Plessis. Dualise lost via split decision to Marvin Vettori in March. But these guys are both ranked. So two ranked middleweight fighters. Brunson looks like the tail end of his career. But you got Brunson at 8. You got Dualise at 9. They both can go. Dualise's only lost twice. Only lost in the UFC is Marvin Vettori, which no slouch in that loss. He's beaten Jack Hermanson. He's beaten Phil Hawes. And I think he's a really good. You could have argued he beat Vettori in that fight. It was close. It was really close. But this is a fun matchup, a good booking by the UFC. Duelise was looking for a fight. Brendan Allen did not want to fight him. He wanted somebody bigger. Now Robert Whittaker. He's calling out Robert Whittaker. We're looking for that fight. That'd be fun. I'd be down for it. Could you book that on MSG as well? I mean, how big do you want that card to be? I mean, this is the Mecca. You want to keep a couple fights for December in Vegas too, but we shall see what the UFC decides to do with that. But that's kind of the MMA update. We'll talk about 291 more as the week goes by. But a solid weekend, all in all, for the sport of mixed martial arts. Also this weekend, you got Bud Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. in Vegas. One of the biggest boxing matches in recent memory. This has been looking for this fight for years. Different promotions, they finally agreed to it. They worked out the financials. So you're going to have that at the same time as the boxing match. My God, what am I going to do? And I'm supposed to spend time with family this weekend and be social and have conversations and care and stuff like that. So that's difficult. But this will be late at night, so maybe they'll all be asleep or drunk or, other things. So we'll see. I do plan on watching both events. He also got a Bellator event in Japan. My God. What are you doing to me, MMA world? I love it, though. And boxing. We had an event in London. Let's go to Royal Liverpool at the Open Championship, otherwise known as the British Open, to people who don't have a proverbial stick up the keister. It was an Open Championship that was, for lack of a better term, forgetful, because there was no drama. There was no anticipation. It was from pillar to post, a dominating performance from Brian Harman, a former winner on the PGA Tour, a guy who's kind of been locked into a top 30 golfer for a long time. He completely dominated the event. He had the lead 9 a.m. Friday morning, and he never lost it the entire event. Ultimately winning by 6 strokes over Jason Day, over Tom Kim, John Rahm, and Sepp Straka. Rory McIlroy never got close. Finished 6 under, tied for 6th for the tournament. Names came and gone throughout the weekend. Cantlay made the cut, never got. Scheffler ended at even par. Didn't finish with a top 15 or top 10 performance. Then that ends that streak for him. Former champion Cameron Smith was a +1. Canadian Corey Connors ended up at +4 for the tournament. Brooks Koepka +8. You had guys didn't even make the cut, like Phil Mickelson and Dustin Johnson. But Brian Harman played links golf, and he played it perfectly. He kept the ball in the fairway. He doesn't bomb it. He looks like an everyman. Kept it in the fairway, kept it out of the danger areas, and he made his putts. He made his putts when they were there. He didn't put himself in dangerous situations. And if he had to get a par, he would get a par. Guys would go -3 over 6, but then they start getting bogeys because they got aggressive. Brian Harman had the lead. He knew it, and he just played to his strengths. And it was a different type of mentality, a different tournament, but this Brian Harman win was Tiger Woods-esque. And what I mean by that is there was no competition. I knew Brian Harman was going to win about noon Saturday. I watched some golf on Sunday, but it was easy. It was easy to predict. You knew what was going to happen. There was no drama. There was nobody within 4 strokes of him, and they'd fall off if they got close. Cameron Young played with him in the final group. He had a good week. Cameron Young had a good weekend, Had a really good performance at a major. Happy for him. I think he's a really talented young player. But he shot 2 over on Sunday at a major, and he finishes tied for 8th. And Jason Day finishing tied for 2nd at a major. I'd love to see that. John Rahm's been top 10 at the majors the last number of them. He's been dominating them. Sepp Straka won a few weeks ago. He's a great golfer. You're 6 strokes back. So you look at these names and you're like, wow. Well, they finished Tommy Fleetwood ended up finishing top 10. He had the lead after the first day. The way the tournament went, that's pretty good. Because a lot of guys fell off. Brian Harman just stuck to his guns, and nobody can take that away from him. And with the win, he likely makes the Ryder Cup team. He's a lock to do it now. To think at the beginning of the year, the Ryder Cup team is going to consist of Brian Harman and Wyndham Clark, and guys like Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas might not be on the team, that sounds crazy. Other than Brian Harman winning, the next biggest story is Justin Thomas missing the cut by that much, shooting an 80 on Thursday, and now he has to play. He's playing at the 3M Open in Minnesota this weekend, which he normally wouldn't after a major because he's Justin Thomas. But he's playing in Minnesota in the Twin Cities, and he's going into Wyndham in Greensboro, North Carolina next weekend because he has to. I believe he's currently 75th in the rankings, and the top 70 make the playoffs. So he needs to have good performances here to make it. Because after these 2 events, then there's the St. Jude. That's the first. That's the top 70. That's the playoffs. Then it's cut down to the top 50, the BMW. Then you have the Tour Championship, the last full weekend of August. That's the golf season in a nutshell. You'll have the Ryder Cup. You'll have some events in October. You'll have the Zozo and different events. But really, that's the golf calendar. That's where people keep track. So to me, it's his season. Does he make the playoff? Can he find his game? He missed the cut at 3 of the 4 majors this year. He won a major last year. They covered him on full swing, winning the PGA. I want him on full swing this year to hear about his mentality and what the hell is happening with him. What's his confidence? What's going through his mind? I mean, it's just... To think he's the one collapsing. Ricky Fowler won an event. Ricky Fowler is playing really good golf. That's a 180. That's a 360. Whatever you want to say. That is a turn of events I didn't see coming. And I love Rick Fowler. But can he make the playoff? Can he play some good golf the next 2 weeks and get in? We'll see. Guys like Vincent Norman, who won an event a number of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago now, he's in. Because he played at the Barracuda, which is going on during the Open Championship. He finished tied for 31st. Not great, but not horrible. And he won the Barbasol. So he's had 2 good events in a row collecting points. And right now, let's see, Justin Thomas. Justin Thomas is 75th in the FedEx. Some bigger names that would miss the playoffs currently. Adam Scott would be a big name if he missed the playoffs. Gary Woodland is at 90. Taylor Pendrith, the Canadian's at 108. He's going to have to play really well if he's going to make it. On the bubble, in the 60s, you have the Visor. Keith Mitchell is 66. KH Lee is number 70 right on the dot. Norman, who I just mentioned, is now 59, so he's rising in the rankings. Kucher. Currently, you got Nick Taylor as at 12 for Canadians. Corey Connors, 29. Svensson's 36. Hadwin's 37. Mackenzie Hughes, 44. So really good season for Canadians. All of them. 5 guys making the playoffs currently. But the 3M will be interesting just because of Justin Thomas for me. Normally it's after a major, it's not a big tournament, it's not a big field, but it's just interesting to see if this guy can play. Can he get in? Can he play some good golf? Does he have any confidence? It's a decent field. You have Cameron Young is coming to play here. Seb Straka is at this event. Emiliano Guerrero, who finished tied for second at the Open. Hideki Matsuyama, Sung J M, Ludwig Aberg, Sam Bennett, who's had a great year. Tony Finau, last year's champion. Gary Woodland, obviously, who needs to play this. Adam Hadwin, he didn't qualify for the Open, but he'll play here. Look to play some good golf. So that's in the Twin Cities this weekend, but I'll be watching and keeping track of it just for Justin Thomas. If he missed the playoff, oof, that would be a hell of a turn of events. After winning a major last year and being one of the hottest golfers in the sport. To the NFL. There's some Saquon Barkley news. There's also some news on Patrice Bergeron. I'm going to save that for tomorrow's program. But there is news in the NFC East. Other news. Last Friday, the NFL owners unanimously voted to approve of Josh Harris buying the Washington Commanders from Daniel Snyder and Tanya Snyder. This starts a new regime where Josh Harris is the majority owner. Magic Johnson is a minority owner. You have a bunch of different Hollywood types, different athletes. But Josh Harris is the figurehead for the new ownership group in Washington. Dan Snyder had more sexual assault allegations than playoff wins over the course of his tenure as owner. That's not hyperbole, by the way. That's actually a fact. He had 4 playoff wins he bought the team in 99. So over 20 years, 4 playoff wins, 0 division titles, 2 All-Pros. And he had about 12 sexual assault allegations. So not even close. After all the workplace things, sexual assault allegations, racist allegations, he is gone. He gets $6.05 billion from Josh Harris, but on the way out, he is fined $60 million from the NFL for all of these allegations, and that's taken out from the sale price, so he doesn't get all that in his pocket, but he bought the team for, I believe it was $800 million, and he sells it for $6.05 billion. So ultimately, a rich guy who's an asshole, who's a pig, wins in the end. I'm done with Daniel Snyder. I'm happy he's gone. Josh Harris buys this team. Here's what he has to do. He can play out this year. Training camp, Ron Rivera. Is it going to be Sam Howell at quarterback? Is it going to be Jacoby Brissett? We'll figure that out. That's not the biggest thing. He needs to change the name of this team, and it's not change the name back to the Redskins. Anybody who's wishing for that, give up on that. That's done. That's dead. That's never happening. But the Commanders, first of all, it's a horrible name. And what are you commanding? It sucks. I don't think they'll do what I want them to do, but I think there's a 100% chance they change the name. They should go back to the Washington football team. The Washington football team was a great name. It was different. It was unique. It stood out. And they need some rebranding in Washington. I would change their jersey colors. That maroon, whatever, it's not red, it's not maroon. I don't know what color it is. It's ugly. Whatever it is, that Washington color, the helmets suck, the jerseys suck, the colors stink, change it. People don't want to buy that merchandise. It looks like a shit product. Change it. Change the name, change the apparel. Preferably not Fanatics. But again, change it up. Because you need to get rid of the Daniel Snyder stink. He's gone. He's no longer running day-to-day operations. He's not the owner. Do what you want to do. Normally, you buy a team, you need to keep the history of the franchise going. No, you don't. Because it's this group. It's this group. It's this team. What they've done is horrible. What they've stood for is nothing. To say you have different morals from somebody means that you have none in that person's eyes. So what they've stood for in anybody's mindset is not okay. So get rid of it. Different owners bought different teams. Back in the day, they bought the Montreal Expos. They were moved to Washington. Did they keep it the Washington Expos? No. They became the Nationals. There was history in Seattle, the Seattle Supersonics. They moved the team to Oklahoma City. They rebranded it. They gave them a new name. Just because you're not moving cities doesn't mean you can't change it, because the legacy of the Washington Commanders, the Redskins, even the football team, you only had it for a little bit of time, has been negative. It needs to change. There needs to be a signal to everybody that this is not happening anymore. We are above this. So that's where this needs to go. I'm glad Josh Harris bought the team. That's great. I don't know anything about Josh Harris. I know he's rich, and now he owns a football team. But you know what? Who I also don't know anything about? Art Rooney. But I know he's run a really successful business. He's had a really successful football team for a long time. How about do that? Play like a Steeler. Play like a Raven. How about be one of these owners that just lets people do their thing and shut the hell up and not get into different situations? That would be my approach. Let your football ops people do their jobs. You sit in the stands and clap when they win. And then fire people when they lose. Like a regular owner. And don't sexually assault anybody or don't do racial things. Just shut up. That's just my approach. Seems to have worked for a few owners over the course of history. I realize it might be funner or easier to do the other way. Sure, of course. But don't do it. Just let it happen. Just let it happen. The football is back. Every team is in training camp. Football is back. It's fantastic. I can't wait. We're going to get more and more news on the NFL, and we've already got in. Nyheim Hines was on a Sea-Doo, was stationary, gets hit by another Sea-Doo. He's out for the season. My God. So he's got some he's got some injuries. And with that said, Buffalo added Dearrington Evans today via Ian Rappaport because of that injury to Naheem Hines. Evans spent the 22 season with the Chicago Bears, rushing for 64 yards and 14 attempts in 6 games. Dalvin Cook remains unsigned. Kareem Hunt remains unsigned. Leonard Fournette remains unsigned. Saquon Barkley is signed. We'll get to that tomorrow. The Saints signed guard Trey Turner. Was a Pro Bowler with that team at one point. 30-year-old. Played last year with the Washington Commanders. So, but we have a preseason game as soon as next week with the Jets and Browns. So it's happening now. It's happening now. To the NHL. We got some arbitration news. The biggest one of all is Ilya Samsonov and the Toronto Maple Leafs. They couldn't agree on a deal, so they went to the arbiter. The Leafs wanted to pay Ilya Samsonov $2.4 million. Samsonov wanted to make $4.9 million. Samsonov will be making $3.55 million on a one-year deal this season. This is a win for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but it's not a complete win. I see that opinion. If you want to pay somebody 2.4 and you have to pay them 3.5, is that really a win? Is it? It's about dollars and cents, and it's about a salary cap, and you think you're paying somebody $1.4 million more than they're worth. Well, that doesn't really sound like a win when you put that into brass tacks, does it? Now, Ilya Samsonov will be pissed. He's making $1.4 million less than he wanted to make, so he definitely feels like he lost, but I also don't think the Leafs completely won this negotiation. I think this is fair. I thought Samsonov would make more because I thought he had a good season. If you compare him, like I did on Friday's podcast, you haven't listened to that, go back. I talk about this in depth. 2 other goaltenders around the league and their salaries this offseason. In particular, guys who got deals, I thought he'd be worth close to $4 million. He gets 3.5. And I think the biggest thing for the Toronto Maple Leafs is Samsonov's on a one-year deal. So you don't have him locked down, and I'd be completely comfortable with that. To me, he needs to prove himself again that he is a number one goaltender and he's somebody that you can rely upon. Joseph Woll may be the heir apparent. He may be the next great goalie in Toronto. He may be homegrown, and he may be fantastic. Too early to tell. Way too early to tell. But they'll wait and see, and they can hope that he is that guy, which is great, if he is. But I'm curious, Samson's going to be angry, for sure, because he thinks he's worth more money. He didn't get it. I get it. Usually, Jeff O'Neill talks about this all the time. He went to arbitration with Jim Rutherford. After he went out of the meeting, he didn't feel like playing for the team ever again. Hated the organization. So, will there be some bad blood? Will there be some hatred? We shall see. But it's a good deal. Just curious to see what the relationship is like for the team and the player going forward. And if there's any hard feelings, because these things happen. It's not just, okay, well, the arbiter decided. Well, the team wanted to pay him less than what the arbiter gave him. There's even more bad blood there, because guess what? Oh, you want to pay me this? This is all you want to pay me? Screw you. I'm better than this. So we'll see. Philip Kurashev, who had a good season with Chicago and a really bad team, got 2 years, $2.5 million per. So he's there. He's a skilled. He'd be fun to play with Connor Bedard. Quite frankly, he's fast. He's kind of built like Connor Bedard. Could play in a wing if they want to. I don't know if they'll put Bedard at center right away. That's a decision they got to make. He's a fun guy. Tony DeAngelo signed a one-year, $1.655 million deal with Carolina. So now he goes to Carolina. I said this before. If you got DeAngelo, you got Burns, you got Pesce, you have Slavin, you got Chatfield, who they really like, and I do too. But they got 5, 6, maybe even 7 NHL defensemen on their roster right now. Who else do they got? They got one this offseason. This is my brain short-circuiting on me. Luckily, I keep notes. That's why I keep notes, so I don't forget everything. Let's see. Carolina. I feel like they signed a defenseman this offseason. I know they did. I'm not crazy, am I? I could be, though. I don't know. Oh, yes, Dmitry Orlov went to Carolina. There we go. It was going to come to me. They got Orlov, Pesce, Slavin, Burns, DeAngelo, Chatfield. That's a top 6 right there. Erik Karlsson doesn't fit into that mix. Doesn't work unless they're trading Pesce out. But again, Pesce goes to San Jose. I don't know. This Erik Karlsson deal hasn't happened July 25th. It hasn't happened yet because it's difficult. And you need 3 teams, basically. And you need an owner that's going to take on some money, which isn't easy for Carolina. If I'm Carolina, let Pittsburgh do it. Carolina should not be afraid of Pittsburgh in their own division. They get Erik Karlsson, you're not sweating one bit. You're not sweating at all because guess what? You were better than them last year. You're still better than them. Let the old folks home get older and get more injury-prone players on that team. They got one in net. They got a second-line center who's like that. They got a defenseman who has a stroke every couple of years, not making a joke about it. Also a fact. He's had 2 in his career already. Let them get another injury-plagued defenseman. Tony DeAngelo was a problem everywhere other than Carolina. Went to Philly this year, complete pain in the ass. Also, I'm not sure he was a problem in New York. He was a Republican. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, depends who you ask, I guess. But he was a Republican who liked Donald Trump. If you ask me, there's nothing wrong with being a Republican, but don't tell anybody I said that. But he was fine in New York. For a while, then they didn't like him. He was always good in Carolina. He has a career season in Carolina, and he took a buyout to leave Philly so that he could come back to Carolina. Love playing for Brendan Moore. He gets to play with a great defense where he can focus on offense and not do as much defensively. Great. If you have that insulation, use it to your advantage. Carolina does. They don't need another Karlsson. How many D can you put on the power play? Enough of this. Other news: the Minnesota Wild and Philip Gustafsson, their great goaltender, are likely to go through the arbitration process on August 4th. Joe Smith of The Athletic reports. Gustafsson will be the second goaltender to go through the process this summer, with Ilya Samsonov of the Toronto Maple Leafs being awarded $3.55. So he sounds like he's going to go through arbitration. That's August 4th. That would be the hearing. Fellow goaltender Jeremy Swayman of the Boston Bruins also currently remains without a contract ahead of his July 30th arbitration hearing. So that would be on Sunday. Weird day. So Jeremy Swayman. We're going to talk more. We got a big Boston Bruins chat happening tomorrow with a big retirement today and what they're going to do. But Minnesota is in a tough spot here because they have another year of Marc-Andre Fleury. Marc-Andre Fleury is under contract through next season at $3.5. He's willing to take on a reduced role moving forward, but will not accept a trade. I think he is a no trade, which again, the fact that he says he wouldn't accept a trade, I'd trade his ass. Enough of Marc-Andre Fleury. Sick of him. Been sick of him for a long time. Haven't done much. They have $5.39 million in cap space per cap friendly with Gustafsson and fellow restricted free agents. Keelan Addison still in need of contracts for next season. Yeah, I don't know if they'll have enough money in $5.39 million to get that done, because I think Gustafsson, if Samsonov got $3.55, he's going to get at least that or more. And they get $14.74 million in dead cap. Wow. So 2 more years of this, of $14 million in dead cap space for Minnesota. They got to work this. They're going to go to arbitration. Boston's and another team in a cap crunch, likely going to arbitration later this weekend with Jeremy Swayman. Like I said, big Bruins chat tomorrow on the pod, talking about Patrice Bergeron and what they're going to do and what they should do with the Boston Bruins, because they are in a predicament now that their longtime leader is hanging up his skates. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to talk about the Bruins, talk about Saquon Barkley and the New York Giants, some news on that front. Talk about the Boston Celtics, NBA, huge signing today, crazy money. So we'll get into that and any other news around the world of sports, track some baseball this evening as well. So enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Enjoy the beautiful weather. Talk to you tomorrow. Turn to the point.